Joining us with his take on what's currently playing out in the equity space is Jason Horn from Steyn Capital Management. Jason, good to chat to you once again. A big story, the IMF and South Africa's debt. A bit of a warning to us. We have our SONA this evening, but our president needs to pay attention because the IMF concerned about what we owe.
You're correct there, Ray. Thanks for having me. I think the report came out last night. Always nice to read these reports from the IMF. Always call it a health check on the patient from an outside party. And I think there's some good and bad in there. I think the overall tone is probably positive, and I think maybe they're being fairly conservative in their estimates. But I mean, if we to your question on the debt, yes, I mean the debt does remain a concern. They do see it breaching 80% and only over the medium term peaking at about 84%. I think we must take that, but at the same time, let's give Treasury some time to put together the budget, and we can then assess what kind of windfall we've got from these higher commodity prices and to what extent there might be a growth surprise. I think just digging into some of the numbers as well, very complimentary of the South African Reserve Bank, agree with the move to the lower inflation targeting, and they're also seeing, for the consumer's sake, which would be quite good, is room for another 75 basis points of cuts as well to a repo rate of 6%. So yes, the commentary around the debt remains a concern, but I think growth estimates are probably on the lighter side, call it up to 1.8% over the medium term. But I think if we take all the reforms that the government has put in place so far, this is why the SONA will be so important in terms of what the agenda is going forward. Can South Africa take the shackles off the private sector and really stimulate growth in this country to what that target with Operation Vulindlela is in the region of 3%? And if they can do that with a chunky primary surplus, things will look really good for South Africa, and we will see a stabilization in those debt numbers.
Yeah, I remember watching the SONA last year and that 3% you spoke about now, Jason, and thinking to myself, come guys, how can we get closer to that? You say 1.8%, how can we get it up to 2%? How's the Rand doing at the moment with all of this? Because, it's a little bit subdued this morning, but it's still below 16 at the moment.
Yeah, so the Rand still, I think, was 15.87 or so last time I checked. And I think the Rand, we've seen a lot of reports come out from a lot of brokers to insinuate that fair value seems to be in the region of 16 at the moment. If we look at the terms of trade, I mean, the commodities are still doing really well from a price perspective. So the terms of trade for South Africa is quite powerful, still doing really well. And that dollar debasement trade is still occurring at this stage. So while it does seem like South Africa from a policy perspective and economy perspective is muddling through, it seems to be good enough to hold these levels. So yes, when there is volatility and sell-offs, we are seeing some weakness in the Rand, but it does seem over the last week or so that fair value does seem to be in the region of 15.80 to 16 Rand. And then couple that with hopefully a positive SONA reaction, maybe those tailwinds will continue.
Yeah. All right, let's look at the United States now on those non-farm payrolls. The data coming out and unemployment on the decrease in the United States. And I think US President Donald Trump's going to look at this and smile a little bit. But smiling not so much because those tariffs with Canada, he's been overruled.
You're right there, eh? I think just to touch on the job numbers quite quickly, there has been some adjustments to how they report from the BLS. So by the estimates I've seen, it does seem that resulted in an increase of 70,000 jobs as a result of that. And because of this change in how they calculate it, we are going to see some volatility in those numbers going forward. But yes, it is a good number overall. I think in the US in particular, we've seen kind of this K-shaped economy they talk about. So kind of the top 20% within the labor market's doing quite well, whereas on the lower end, they seem to be struggling. So that's why leading into the votes in the House on the Canadian tariffs, there's a lot of Republican lawmakers that are up for re-election in the midterms, and they are in these swing states where a lot of these people are under pressure. There's a cost of living crisis there, and they simply cannot allow these tariffs to come in and impact their constituents. So that is why you're seeing this. And I think you're also seeing a reaction to what Donald Trump is doing in the polls. If we look at him from an economy point of view as well as immigration point of view, his numbers currently, per the latest polling data, are at the lowest they have been, even if we consider the first term of the Trump presidency. So there's definitely a movement, particularly with those Republicans that are under pressure. And yeah, it does. Let me think that we're probably going to see some form of trade deal with China in the next couple of months as Trump tries to salvage this from a foreign policy perspective to get those ratings up.
Gosh, what a turnaround, really is. Right, back home, South 32 H1 results. Of course, miners can't lose at the moment.
Yeah, look, I think it's a pretty solid update and good cost results as well. I mean, the operational performance was largely driven by Sierra Gorda as well as Cannington. And yeah, I think guidance, like when I checked, was largely unchanged. But yeah, interestingly, it does seem that they're planning to prioritize the likes of copper and zinc over aluminium. They're seeing the returns they're able to generate in the region of 45 to 70% on that versus 15% in aluminium. So that does seem like they're pivoting there, as well as they don't have any plans to replace those volumes from the Mozal shutdown. So yeah, definitely a solid update for them.
Right, Jason, hold that thought before we move on to your stock pick. Let's reflect on some counters that have found favor with your industry peers.
The LVMH is looking attractive for me at current levels. You know, locally I do own and do love my Richemont, but LVMH I think is looking attractive, both on a forward PE basis. When you look at historically, it's now trading at the lower side, and also price to books. So valuations is attractive, but clearly the market is telling us they still love anything shiny. They love the expensive stuff.
Naspers, and you can take Prosus as well. It really doesn't matter at this point. These companies have sold off heavily towards the end of last year up until now. Tencent has come under pressure, I think unfairly so. Regulatory fears flaring up again. I see this as a trading opportunity. Naspers and Prosus, on top of the Tencent move, has also seen their discounts widen, despite some really positive progress from a portfolio management perspective.
Right, there you go, Jason. LVMH, that's an interesting one.
It is indeed, Ray. A very good company, very good operator as well, running that business. Yeah, I think luxury is an interesting one. It's very much a high quality business, but yeah, consumer demand globally, there've been a lot of questions, and the results from the industry have been, let's say, lukewarm at best up until now. But I mean, Hermes reported today looks fairly resilient, and then the Kering CEO yesterday mentioning that looks like 2025 the bottom is in. Obviously a lot of execution risk here, but yeah, look, to Skalk's point, it is trading cheaper on a relative basis. It's still not cheap from like the likes of Prada, which I mentioned last week, but it will at some point start looking interesting. But yes, a lot of execution risk, and to what extent can they kind of turn things around in the likes of China and Japan with all the geopolitical issues going on there at the moment.
Yeah. Then, of course, Naspers and Prosus, they've been selling off assets that aren't making money and trimming down because they say they want to really jump ahead. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, we mentioned this last week as well, and that's correct. I think, yeah, that discount is widening. There are these regulatory concerns surrounding train ticket prices, I believe. Read that this morning. But also there's the selling has been relentless in them. I mean, there's also a lot of worries around this AI programming impacting the likes of their gaming business as well. So I think the market is a bit nervous. The jury's still out in terms of what the impact will be, but yeah, it does seem there's a bit of a turnaround in Naspers and Prosus today. But yeah, it's been absolutely relentless, and I don't think it's justified given, to your point, how well the management has been performing.
Yeah, they're really trying. Right, what is your stock pick now?
My stock pick is Southern Sun. It's a hotel operator trading at 12 times PE, about 20% market share of domestic hotel rooms. And I think if we look back to yesterday's City Lodge Sens, just to kind of get a glimpse into what the second half of the year was, I mean, their HEPS was up 29 to 36%. So we prefer Southern Sun. It's at a similar valuation, but with much better located hotels. So, I mean, it's valued at around 14 billion rand. To replace their stock, it's going to cost 30 billion rand. So we are seeing tourist arrivals increase nationally, and more importantly, not just in Cape Town. I think what people don't talk about is this uptick in tourism in the likes of Johannesburg last year.
Okay.
As well as over the last few months as well, we've seen an uptick in KZN too. And this business is effectively ungeared as well, which provides optionality to grow earnings per share from a management team who we believe are really savvy capital allocators.
Gosh, that is so interesting. Jason, thank you so much. Good to have you with us once again on
Thanks,
Business
Ray.
Lunch. Thank you. That was Jason Horn from Steyn Capital Management.